August 21, 2023, Lucy Letby became only the fourth woman in British legal history to receive a whole life order, not one life sentence. But 15-1 for each victim stacked, so she will die behind bars. The judge called it a campaign of cruelty calculated and marked by deep malevolence bordering on sadism. But most people miss the point. This punishment was never meant to replace execution. It was designed to outlast it. Letby now occupies a legal category shared by fewer than 70 people in the United Kingdom, alongside names like Rosemary West, Wayne Couzens, and Levi Belfield, the most reviled offenders in British history. Unlike death row inmates who know their suffering ends, she faces something colder. Decades of identical walls, identical routines, identical days that never lead anywhere. Prisoners with similar sentences call it continual despair, a life stretched into an endless corridor of time. A punishment that erases hope and replaces it with time that never forgives anything. Here is what makes her situation uniquely disturbing in a way most people never consider. There is technically a mechanism for mercy built into British law. A theoretical door that could open if she becomes terminally ill or reaches extreme old age. The Secretary of State for Justice has the authority to grant compassionate release. But that authority has never been used for a whole life prisoner. Not once. People with terminal cancer have died inside prison walls anyway. The law exists to satisfy human rights requirements and create the illusion that the sentence is not absolute. In practice, it is meaningless. A bureaucratic placeholder designed to make a permanent punishment appear humane. Lucy Letby exists inside the British high-security prison system, where her location shifts between facilities depending on security threats, medical needs, and institutional decisions. She does not choose where she lives. She does not choose who surrounds her. Her environment is determined by administrators who see her as a file number, a risk profile, a logistical issue to manage. Some of the institutions connected to her incarceration house the most psychologically unstable women in the country. These facilities are designed not only to contain violent offenders but to manage severe personality disorders. Women arriving at such prisons show extremely high rates of psychological disturbance. A significant percentage arrive actively psychotic upon reception. This is the environment she exists in. A population filled with instability, paranoia, violent ideation, and mental collapse. Imagine the sensory reality. Screams through the night, doors slamming, voices shouting at invisible figures, sudden eruptions of violence, corridors filled with unpredictability. A place where no one fully trusts anyone else and sanity is fragile. This is not just a prison. It is a containment system for human psychological breakdown. Another facility connected to her case is the largest women's prison in Europe, operated by a private corporation. It costs tens of thousands per prisoner each year, but money does not translate to safety, dignity, or humane conditions. Women have given birth alone in cells. Others have labored for hours without medical assistance. There are documented deaths caused by neglect and delayed care. The system functions more like industrial warehousing of human beings than rehabilitation. Reports about her personal conditions have caused outrage. Some sources claim she has a private bathroom, a television, a desk, and phone access. Other prisoners reportedly see this as preferential treatment. But those details miss the psychological reality. These are not luxuries for someone sentenced to never leave. These are survival tools. The television breaks the endless repetition. The phone allows limited monitored contact with a world that continues without her. The private bathroom removes the humiliation of constant surveillance. For a whole life prisoner, every small comfort becomes amplified. A meal becomes an event. Exercise becomes identity. Buying basic items becomes the only expression of choice. When freedom is erased, trivial routines become the only remaining structure of self. Her daily life follows a strict institutional rhythm. Lights on early in the morning. Breakfast distributed through metal slots. Work assignments or controlled programs if permitted. Lunch. Midday structured activity. Evening meal. Lockdown. Lights out. This pattern repeats without variation. No weekends. No holidays. No meaningful milestones except aging visible in mirrors and medical charts. The physical environment is only the outer shell of her punishment. The deeper punishment occurs in the mind. Long-term confinement alters cognition. Memory declines. Anxiety intensifies. Social interaction becomes painful. Institutionalization rewires identity so that the outside world becomes abstract and unreal. Prisoners serving similar sentences describe their existence as a continuous state of despair. Time becomes an enemy with no endpoint. Unlike death row inmates who know suffering will end, whole-life prisoners face endless duration. One former inmate described it as living death where every morning brings the same realization. This never ends. British law labels this punishment a whole life order. In her case, multiple orders were stacked consecutively. She became one of the few women in modern history to receive such a sentence. The judge described her actions as cruel, calculated, and cynical. He said the crimes involved the smallest and most vulnerable victims imaginable. He noted a deep malevolence and an absence of remorse or mitigating factors. Legally, a theoretical path to release exists. Section 30 of the Crime Sentences Act grants discretionary release power in exceptional circumstances. Terminal illness, severe disability, or extreme old age could qualify. But history shows this mechanism is fiction. No whole-life prisoner has ever been released under this provision. The clause exists to satisfy international human rights rulings that require sentences to be technically reducible. In practice, the punishment is permanent. She will age inside institutional walls. Her hair will turn gray. Her joints will weaken. Her eyesight will deteriorate. Chronic illness will become another layer of confinement. Medical care inside prison systems is often slow and inadequate. She will watch her body decline knowing release will never come. There is another psychological dimension that makes this sentence uniquely tormenting. The controversy surrounding her conviction continues to grow. Some experts have questioned the evidence and the methods used in court. Others have called the case one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in modern British history. Public debate follows her case endlessly, and critics and supporters argue while she remains trapped inside a system that never pauses today. Psychologically, this creates a paradox with no escape. Either she is guilty and must confront what she did every single day for decades, or she is innocent and condemned to die imprisoned while the world believes she committed unimaginable crimes. Both scenarios represent extreme psychological torture. False hope becomes another instrument of punishment. Each article questioning the verdict creates a flicker of possibility that likely leads nowhere. That flicker can be more painful than certainty. It keeps the mind oscillating between despair and expectation without resolution. She is in her mid-30s. If she lives into old age, she faces half a century inside controlled environments. 50 years of identical routines. 50 years of institutional meals, scheduled movement, monitored communication, and constant surveillance. 50 years of existing as a static figure while the outside world evolves beyond recognition. Time becomes the central mechanism of punishment. Every year marks the accumulation of loss. Loss of autonomy. Loss of relationships. Loss of identity. Loss of relevance. Society progresses while her existence remains frozen within institutional frameworks. Death row carries certainty. Execution dates eventually arrive. The suffering ends. Whole life sentences offer only duration. Endless time becomes the punishment. Each holiday, birthday, and anniversary becomes a reminder that nothing changes. Autonomy erodes in incremental moments. Being told when to wake, when to eat, when to move, and when to sleep. Every decision externalized. Every choice replaced by institutional procedure. Over decades, this produces a psychological erosion of self. Identity becomes inmate number rather than person. Every small indignity compounds. Loss of privacy. Loss of spontaneity. Loss of meaningful relationships. Loss of physical freedom. Loss of future planning. Loss of relevance in the world outside. These losses accumulate into a psychological weight that intensifies with time. This punishment is not cinematic. It is not dramatic. It is not sudden. It is the slow, grinding erosion of human existence stretched across decades until the body fails. The judge predicted another dimension of her fate. Public attention will fade. Media interest will move on. New cases will replace her story. She will become a historical footnote rather than a headline. And she will remain in that cell long after public fascination disappears. Obscurity becomes another punishment. Not just confinement but erasure of relevance. To be remembered as a monster briefly and then forgotten entirely while still alive and aware. Years from now she will wake to the same institutional lights. She will eat the same meals. She will walk the same corridors. She will speak to fewer people as memories fade. Friends, family, and public interest will diminish. The world outside will become increasingly abstract and distant. A whole life order does not end. It does not provide closure. It does not offer redemption. Provides repetition. Repetition of routine, repetition of environment, repetition of isolation until biological failure ends consciousness. This is why some argue it surpasses execution. Death is an event. Whole life imprisonment is a process. It is prolonged exposure to existential stasis. The system frames it as justice. Society frames it as safety. But for the individual it becomes an endless psychological experiment in endurance, identity erosion, and time perception. Her existence becomes a controlled variable inside institutional walls. Observed, managed, documented, but never liberated. This is the reality behind the phrase whole life order. Not a metaphor, not rhetoric. A literal structure of existence engineered to continue until death. And every day she remains alive, the punishment continues without pause. That is the architecture of a sentence designed not to kill but to outlast life itself. The judge who condemned Lucy Letby said she should never walk free again. He also warned of something quieter and more brutal. The cameras will disappear. The interviews will stop. The headlines will move on. That fading may be the harshest sentence of all. Not just decades of confinement, but the slow erasure of relevance. The world will continue. New crimes will fill the news cycle. Her name will shrink into a footnote in true crime archives. And she will still be there, repeating the same day with no audience left to watch. Death offers an ending. A whole life order offers repetition. The same corridors, the same schedule, the same crushing certainty that nothing ever changes. 50 years from now, if she is still alive, she will wake to fluorescent lights, eat institutional breakfast, walk to the same yard, make monitored calls to fewer voices who remember her. This is not an alternative to execution. It is something colder. A sentence that only biology can terminate. No countdown clock. No final date. No mercy appeal that truly matters. Just time accumulating until the body finally collapses behind locked doors while memory and identity erode. This is what Lucy Letby faces every single day for the rest of her natural life.